She seemed like the perfect nurse, wife, and mom on the outside. She was intelligent, respected, and trusted by her patients at their most vulnerable time until her husband disappeared without a trace. Days later, pieces of his body began washing up in the Chesapeake Bay, stuffed into suitcases. He'd been shot, then carefully disposed of with the hopes that he would never be found again. But when investigators started pulling at the threads, everything led back to one person, known as the Suitcase Killer. So, what really happened to William Bill McGuire? And how does someone like Melanie go from saving lives to being accused of one of the most calculated and brutal murders in recent history? Welcome to the True Crime Nurse, everybody. My name is Kat, and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell before you go. All right, today's case came highly requested, so grab a snack and sit back because it's going to be a wild one. William Theodore McGuire, also lovingly known as Bill, was born on September 21st, 1964 in Bronx, New York to William and Ruth McGuire. He grew up moving around quite a bit, so when he decided to enlist in the United States Navy, moving around was pretty easy for him. He signed up right after high school and worked in the Navy as an electronics technician. Bill was stationed in Virginia Beach, and it was in that coastal city, surrounded by sailors and the busy town, that he would meet his first wife, named Marcy Polk. I am going to touch on their relationship a little bit just because it does relate to today's case. Bill and Marcy got married in 1986, and at first their life together seemed really happy, but then Bill began gambling and drinking heavily. Marcy told her family and friends that the man that she married back in Virginia did not seem to be the same man anymore once they moved to New Jersey. Their relationship deteriorated pretty quickly, and in 1995, Marcy ended up filing a restraining order against Bill because he'd been throwing rocks through her window. After their divorce was finalized, Bill stayed in New Jersey and found his way into the technology world as a computer programmer and analyst. This was perfect for him given his Navy career background. By the early 2000s, he also landed a position as an adjunct professor at the New Jersey Institute of Technology in Newark. He taught computer science courses and he managed program analysis work, which earned him a stable and comfortable income. This way of life may not have been extravagant, but it was stable and respectable, and it gave him something that the Navy years never quite had, and that was permanence. Bill McGuire stood about 6 feet 3 inches tall, but according to his family and friends, he was a total teddy bear. His sister Cindy said that he could light up any room that he walked into, and that he was someone who genuinely enjoyed being around other people. He did have some rough edges around here and there, but she said that he was not at all the dangerous type. Bill also went through some financial hardships, so he declared bankruptcy in 1999, allegedly because of his gambling habits. His life was far from perfect, but everyone knew how much he wanted a better and different life. He dreamt of having a family and kids someday, and he was turning over a new leaf. He just needed to find a life partner to grow a family with. Melanie Lynn Slate was born on October 8, 1972, in Ridgewood, New Jersey, to Linda and Michael Slate. She grew up in Ridgewood and then Middletown Township, New Jersey later on. Melanie went to Middletown High School South, where she graduated in the top 5% of her class in 1990, so she was very intelligent. She was also a member of the National Honor Society and the Spanish National Honor Society. Even as a teenager, she was driven, high-achieving, and according to her brother, occasionally risky in her personal life. Melanie then went to Rutgers University, where she pursued a double major in mathematics and psychology, but she didn't stop there. She graduated in 1994, but then she decided she wanted to change paths and go to nursing school at Charles E. Gregory Nursing School, graduating second in her class in 1997. This goes to show us that she is naturally intelligent because nursing school is incredibly challenging. As a nursing student, she became especially interested in obstetrics and gynecology, and even more so in the field of infertility. That's a specialty that requires an unusual combination of clinical precision and emotional sensitivity because these are patients that are typically in their most vulnerable state. Bill McGuire and Melanie met in 1997 while they were both working as servers at a restaurant. Bill had picked up this job on the side to make some extra cash, and he was also known as the rude waiter there. Not exactly something you would want to be known as, but Melanie was drawn to him and they were attracted to each other pretty quickly mutually. They wanted the same things in life, and they dated for 2 years while Melanie went through nursing school. By 1999, Melanie had become a nurse and found a job at a fertility clinic in Morristown called Reproductive Medical Associates, which was one of the largest infertility programs on the East Coast at the time, and it still is pretty large. She got a job there as a nurse coordinator. Her responsibilities were pretty extensive. She assisted with IVF procedures, monitored patient treatments, handled third-party reproduction coordination, including egg donation and surrogacy, and served as a point of contact to her patients. Her patients described her as warm, attentive, and capable of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. One patient named Linda Smith said, "She really captured you. She captured your heart right away. She just made you feel like you were the most important person in her office." This sounds ideal for a nurse, right? Well, stay tuned. Bill and Melanie got married in West Orange in June of 1999 after she graduated nursing school. Early on in their marriage, according to Melanie, things were great. Their first son arrived in 2000, which was less than a year after their wedding, and she said that he was such a light, so much so that their marriage got even better. They both had wanted kids so desperately, so having their son gave them everything they ever wanted. The sun rose and set over that child and over Melanie, in her own words. Bill was a devoted, enthusiastic, fully committed father and husband. Not too long after their first baby boy, their second son arrived in 2003. The McGuires were a happy, beautiful little family of 4, living in an apartment in Woodbridge Township, and for a while, that seemed to be enough. Melanie said that things gradually deteriorated from there, though. Bill's gambling trips to Atlantic City were becoming more frequent, the money was disappearing, and the frustration would come home with him, and he would direct it at Melanie. She said Bill was someone who at the time could not tolerate not getting what he wanted, day traded and gambled, scratched his skin till he literally bled, and talked about someone being in their attic. To her, these were all signs that something was deeply brewing in him and he was beginning to unravel. She claimed that he had threatened to kill her over an argument over a speeding ticket and that he had become increasingly violent both verbally and physically toward her. Not to say that those things didn't happen, but none of those claims were ever corroborated by anybody. No neighbors ever heard anything alarming coming from their apartment. No friends or colleagues of Melanie's ever described seeing marks on her, and she never told anyone that she trusted she'd been treated this way. His sister Cindy maintained a close relationship with her brother all throughout his adult life and when they were little, and she never witnessed anything violent between them either. Regardless, though, their marriage was falling apart. And one common theme we see in this space is that when a marriage is in a pressure cooker, the cracks allow for distractions to slip in. The third person we need to talk about before we get into what happened is Dr. Bradley Miller. He is a board-certified reproductive endocrinologist and a physician that specializes in fertility and hormonal disorders. This man was a partner at Reproductive Medicine Associates in Morristown, New Jersey, which is the same clinic where Melanie was working as a nurse. He trained at Wayne State University School of Medicine, completed a residency at the National Naval Medical Center, and he finished a fellowship in reproductive endocrinology and infertility at the National Institute of Health. He was a highly accomplished physician, and he was also married with 3 children. I'm sure you know where this story is about to go now. The affair between Melanie and Dr. Bradley began in the summer of 2002. Melanie was 38 weeks pregnant with her and Bill's second child when her relationship with Dr. Miller became romantic. What started as a workplace dynamic with a senior physician and a nurse who assisted him slowly evolved into something far more serious and intimate. Dr. Miller bought the 2 of them prepaid cell phones specifically so that they could text and call each other all day, every day, without being caught by their spouses. They spoke multiple times a day, every single day. Their conversations were deep and vulnerable, so it was both physical and emotional cheating at this point. Melanie was deeply in love with Dr. Miller, but Miller said that he cared about Melanie, but he was clear from the beginning that no matter what, he would never leave his wife. So, for nearly 3 years, the affair continued on. Melanie went home to Bill and the boys, and Dr. Miller would go home to his wife and his children. But by the spring of 2004, the McGuire marriage was basically over, not only because of Bill's gambling, but because Melanie's attention was now elsewhere. On the morning of Wednesday, April 28, 2004, Melanie dropped her 2 sons off at daycare at 8:20 in the morning. From there, she did not go directly to work as planned. Instead, she went to Walgreens Pharmacy in Edison, which is less than a mile from the children's school. At 8:32 in the morning, a prescription was filled in the name of one of Dr. Miller's actual patients. This was a real woman who had appointments at the Morristown Clinic in March and April of 2004. This prescription had been written on a prescription pad that belonged to Dr. Bradley Miller, and the drug prescribed was for chloral hydrate, which is a powerful sedative. This medication is a clear to slightly yellowish colored liquid, and it has a bitter, pungent taste that could be masked by a strong drink. Remember that. Because it's a sedative, it produces unconsciousness, and it's typically used prior to surgery to calm patients down, but it's also been combined with alcohol illegally. The two together have what's called a synergistic effect, making the two substances mixed together more dangerous and stronger together than they are apart. Let me know if you've heard of this, but apparently this is referred to as a Mickey Finn, where chloral hydrate is intentionally dissolved into an alcoholic beverage, similar to lean being alcohol and cough syrup. I had never heard of a Mickey Finn until I researched this case, so please tell me I'm not the only one that learned this today. Dr. Miller denied writing this prescription. A handwriting expert did verify that the signature on that prescription pad was not Dr. Miller's, so keep that in mind too. The managing partner at the Morristown practice said that this was not unusual for the nurses at the clinic to sign Dr. Miller's name to prescriptions, and that Melanie had done so before, but he also said that chloral hydrate was a drug that no one at their practice would typically prescribe to fertility patients. The patient whose name was on the prescription said that she'd also never requested it, and she'd never visited that Walgreens either. After that pharmacy visit, though, Bill and Melanie closed on a new home in Warren County that very same afternoon. The paperwork was signed. The deal was done. They were officially homeowners now. The house that they'd worked hard for years was finally theirs, and Bill was so happy to be in a home with a yard for his kids. He called the gas company at 5:37 that night to transfer utilities to the new house, and then he called one friend at 5:44 and another friend at 5:59. Both of those calls were to just share the happy news about the house closing and that he was so excited for his little family. But those were the last phone calls that Bill would ever make. According to Melanie, when they returned to the Woodbridge apartment that night, they got into a huge explosive argument. She said that Bill was unhappy with the house that they had just closed on and that he complained that he had settled for it. She said that the argument escalated and that at some point Bill shoved her against the wall, stuffed a dryer sheet in her mouth, and then slapped her. She said that she took one of the boys into the bathroom and locked herself in there for her own protection, and she could hear Bill packing as he raged through the apartment. She said he left sometime that night, telling her that she would never see him again, and this was the last time she heard from her husband. On April 29th, the morning after Bill disappeared, Melanie took both of the boys to daycare, then she met with divorce attorneys. She drove to the courthouse to try to file for a DV restraining order against Bill, but she ended up abandoning that attempt because the courthouse was too crowded that day. That night, she checked into the Red Roof Inn in Edison, paying cash for her room. Then she drove to Atlantic City. In Atlantic City, surveillance footage from the Flamingo Motel captured an important moment. At 12:40 that morning on April 30th, someone was seen parking Bill McGuire's car in a lot behind the motel. These were spaces that are reserved for employees only that are working in the motel, and the car didn't have the required parking sticker, which stood out. A second vehicle was visible in the footage, and that was Melanie's car. The footage was blurry and grainy, so they couldn't officially ID the person that was driving Bill's car, but Melanie later admitted that she moved it herself. Her story was that it was a prank or a way to spite Bill, which is apparently something that the two of them did to each other whenever they were mad. She said that she'd taken a cab back from Atlantic City to the Edison area, then took another cab back to go get her own car. I'm sure you're already thinking what I am, though. This story doesn't add up. After she got back from Atlantic City, Melanie went back to the courthouse and she told the judge about the incident with the dryer sheet, about being slapped, and the judge granted her a temporary restraining order against her husband. In the paperwork, though, she was asked if there were any firearms in the home or if Bill owned any weapons, and she answered no. But what she didn't offer up is that she had purchased a .38 caliber revolver just 4 days earlier. After leaving court, Melanie moved out of the Woodbridge apartment and into the new Warren County house. She consulted more attorneys, and on May 25th, she filed for divorce, stating that this marriage was broken by Bill's gambling addiction, his alcohol use, erratic behavior like scratching his skin and intruders in the attic, and that his physical violence toward her had escalated. The divorce seemed to eerily mirror what Bill's first wife, Marcy Polk, had filed years earlier, too. On the morning of May 5th, 2004, two fishermen and their kids were out near the Chesapeake Bay Bridge when they spotted something dark floating in the water. It was a suitcase which seemed very strange and out of place. They fished it out and immediately called the police. Virginia Beach police arrived and opened the suitcase, and what the officer found inside was shocking. To his horror, he found two legs from the knees down, and the legs were wrapped in black garbage bags and sealed with adhesive tape. They belonged to a man, and there was no ID, no wallet, or anything else that could tell the investigators whose legs they had just found. For the next several days, investigators had nothing to go off of but a pair of human legs, a suitcase, and the open water, but detectives worked hard to still try to figure out who this was. Fingerprint analysts attempted to lift prints from the suitcase, but water was on the surface, which degraded the friction ridge detail that would normally make fingerprint recovery possible. Crime scene supervisor Elizabeth Dunton said that the ocean was her greatest obstacle because the suitcases were saturated with water, and it just destroyed a lot of evidence that was probably on and inside of those suitcases. On May 11th, 2004, so just a few days later, a graduate student was picking up trash on Fisherman Island National Wild Refuge, which is a barrier island at the southern end of Virginia Beach, near the entrance to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. This is where a second suitcase was found washed up on the beach. This one was larger though, and it was a 30-inch Kenneth Cole rolling bag, but inside were the torso and head of a man wrapped in garbage bags, and around the torso was a flat blanket. The head showed a gunshot entry wound to the forehead and an exit wound, and the torso showed 2 gunshot wounds to the chest, which was again a horrifying and gruesome discovery for the investigators and the college student. Then a third and final suitcase was recovered on May 16th, floating near the bridge tunnel's second island. This one was the smallest suitcase, and it contained the midsection of the body, including the pelvic region and upper thighs down to the knees, connecting what had been in the first suitcase to what had been found in the second. The 3 pieces of a man, separated and sealed, had been thrown carelessly into the water, and they had drifted along the bay over 11 days before finally coming to rest in 3 separate locations. Together, these suitcases contained most of a human body of a man. A forensic artist was brought in to reconstruct his face, and this sketch was shared with the media with the hopes that someone out there would know who this man was. The investigators finally got an answer for who their John Doe could be when on May 21st, a close family friend of Bill McGuire's named Susan Rice saw the forensic sketch on TV. Something about this sketch just stopped her in her tracks. She called the Virginia Beach Police Department, and investigators confirmed that this man was William Thomas McGuire at only 39 years old from Woodbridge Township, New Jersey. He was a Navy veteran, a programmer analyst, a professor, and father of 2 little boys who were only 3 and 1. He'd been missing since April 28th, so more than 3 weeks, and no one had reported him missing. What happened to him? And more importantly, who was capable of doing something like this? Virginia Beach detectives headed to Melanie McGuire's new house to notify her about her husband's death. When they told her, they watched her reaction closely. Melanie burst into tears and sobbed for an hour, and her mother had to literally hold her up. But then one of the detectives noted something that stayed with him through the whole investigation. She made expressions as if she were crying, but she never shed a single tear. He also said that she immediately suggested investigators look into Bill's gambling connections in Atlantic City because he had a knack for making enemies and that the wrong people may have finally caught up with him. Melanie immediately pointing fingers instead of asking questions about her husband seemed very odd. She told them that she had no idea where Bill's car was and no idea where Bill had gone on the night of April 28th. She did not tell them that she had driven his car to Atlantic City herself and parked it behind a motel, though. Before we get too deep into what happened next, we do need to spend some time on the autopsy, and if this part is too heavy to listen to, then please feel free to skip ahead. The autopsy on Bill's remains was one of the most technically demanding autopsies that any medical examiner has ever had to conduct for a few reasons. First, the body arrived in three separate suitcases, discovered at different locations over the span of 11 days, and each of them spent different amounts of time submerged in or floating near salt water. Salt water is extremely destructive to evidence and it's corrosive to DNA, as we know from several recent cases. But forensic pathologist Dr. Wendy Gunther conducted the autopsy on Bill despite those challenging conditions, and she was still able to make some determinations about the cause and manner of death. Bill died from the gunshot wounds, and she determined that he was shot at least 3 times, but she believed the total number could have been 4. The condition of his body made an exact count difficult, though. The gunshots that she could document with certainty were 1 through the forehead and at least 2 in the torso. 2 bullets were recovered during the autopsy, and obviously these were not the bullets that passed through and exited because those were lost, but 2 bullets that had lodged within the tissues were still present. These bullets had been fired from a .38 caliber revolver. Based on ballistics, the weapon that fired these could have been produced by 6 or more different manufacturers, but that gun was never found to compare, so no match could be made between the weapon and the recovered bullets. We do know, though, that the caliber and bullet matched perfectly to what Melanie had purchased. The ME said that the second bullet that was recovered appeared to have what was called a short return. This was new to me, but this is a rare phenomenon when a bullet partially exits the body and then is drawn back into the skin around the wound. She said that she's only encountered these maybe 10 times in her entire 13-year career as a forensic pathologist at that point, so definitely a rare finding. One of the 2 bullets was covered with these greenish brown fiber strands, though. These were identified as polyester fill, which is the material used in stuffing pillows or couch cushions and other household items. This means that these bullets passed through a fabric-covered object before entering the body. But why? The gun was fired through a pillow or similar object to silence the sound of the shot. Remember, they were in their apartment that night, so a gunshot fired without any kind of sound silencer would have been clearly heard by the neighbors. And then, before you know it, police would have been on scene, and a killer obviously wouldn't have wanted that. The McGuires happened to own a green couch with green cushions. The polyester fill and the greenish color of the fibers were consistent with material from those same exact cushions. The gun was never found, like I already mentioned, but the traces of the green polyester on the bullet inside of a dead man's body told investigators something important. Whoever fired that gun had thought about what it would sound like outside of the apartment and had access to the apartment. Melanie never reported any break-ins that night and didn't even report her husband missing, so things were already looking highly suspicious. Who else could it be at this point? The autopsy found no defensive wounds on Bill, meaning there were no injuries to his hands, arms, or body that would have suggested that he even tried to fight back, which is absolutely heartbreaking to think about. He was completely caught off guard by someone that he loved and trusted in his own home. According to the experts, given his size, this also strongly indicates that he was not fully conscious during the attack. Prosecutors argued that the reason he didn't fight back was because of the sedation from the chloral hydrate, which you will see how that came up during the investigation here shortly. It was also confirmed that the dismemberment occurred after death because there was an absence of any response at the cut sites, meaning his body did not react by bleeding when he was cut. The way his body was found showed that this was methodical and precise. Bone cuts were made using a reciprocating saw, but the soft tissue or the skin were cut with a sharp blade. The body was separated at anatomically logical points, meaning whoever did this had some level of anatomical knowledge or medical education. The prosecutors said that this had to be someone with medical or clinical experience, and I completely agree. The body had also been drained of blood prior to being put into these suitcases, and the garbage bags and suitcases contained almost no pooled blood. This is not the norm, and it took precision and planning for that to be the case, and him being drained of his blood was so disturbing. When the investigators did the luminol testing in the apartment, they essentially found nothing. They ripped up the flooring, the carpet, and they turned that entire apartment upside down, but they found almost no blood strangely inside that apartment. The toxicology tests also showed no trace of chloral hydrate or any other drugs in his system, but An expert testified that chloral hydrate breaks down so quickly in the blood that after death and decomposition and saltwater exposure, it would accelerate the processes of degrading, making it highly unlikely that any trace would be in his system after 7 to 11 days. The most important finding that the ME discovered, though, was the forensic link between Melanie McGuire and the remains of her husband. There were two DNA profiles recovered from the adhesive tape used to seal the garbage bags around his body. The first individual was, of course, Bill. That was expected. But the second individual was Melanie. The defense's explanation for this was that she could have touched the tape at any point during home life because tape is a common household item, so the presence of her DNA meant that she had just touched it at some point in the past. Ridiculous, right? There were also small hairs embedded into the tape from razor stubble, like what you may find on a bathroom floor or sink, and this tied the scene to the apartment where the McGuires lived together. A bathroom floor doesn't spontaneously transport its contents onto packing tape. Something or someone carried them there during the process of wrapping his body, possibly in that bathroom where Bill once shaved. So, to close out our autopsy portion, the manner of death was, of course, a homicide. The official cause was from multiple gunshot wounds to either the head or chest because they would have both independently been fatal on their own. This was overkill. The combination of the head and chest gunshots were not the pattern that you'd see in an accident or struggle. This was deliberate murder. Now, to go back to the investigation, in October 2004, the New Jersey State Police took over the case. One of the most significant findings was Bill's car. He had a 2002 Nissan Maxima, and it had been towed from the Flamingo Motel parking lot in Atlantic City on May 8th, 2 weeks after Bill vanished, after a towing company employee reported that a vehicle had been sitting in the employee lot without the required sticker. When police looked at his car, they found several things that were highly concerning on the front passenger seat. Bill's cell phone and brochures for Atlantic City and Virginia Beach hotels were there. Was Bill hotel shopping before his disappearance, and if so, why? Inside the glove compartment, they found something even more concerning, though, a syringe that matched the kind of syringes used at the Morristown Fertility Clinic and a prescription bottle of chloral hydrate. This is when they discovered that prescription that was in the name of one of Dr. Miller's real patients and that it had been filled at 8:32 in the morning on April 28th at a Walgreens pharmacy in Edison. This was 12 minutes after Melanie had dropped her kids off at daycare that morning. Investigators vacuumed the interior of the car to have forensics take a look, and it contained microscopic fragments of human flesh. This is not consistent with material that would have been shed by a living person, like dead skin cells that slough off. These would only be produced during the dismemberment of a human body. The media described it as human sawdust, which just turns my stomach, but the prosecutors argued that this was evidence that Bill McGuire's remains or tools to murder him had to have been transported in his vehicle. The blanket found around Bill's torso was another thread that led back to Melanie. The blanket had the markings HCSC, which was a stamp from a linen supply company that distributed medical-grade linens to hundreds of medical practices all over New Jersey. Reproductive Medicine Associates of Morristown just so happened to be one of their clients, and they received a batch in April 2004. A witness also testified that Melanie had been seen using the same type of blanket to protect her furniture during her independent move into their house, without Bill there, keep in mind, which confirmed that she did in fact have work blankets at home with her. The black bags that were used to wrap William McGuire's body also showed that they came from the same manufacturing batch as bags that were found in the McGuire apartment. An expert matched them using microscopic production markings, showing that they were made on the same line within hours of each other. Melanie had also used similar bags to give away her husband's clothes after his disappearance, linking those bags to her before, during, and after her husband's murder. The home computer also had an interesting search history on it, including topics like poisons, gun laws, sedatives, and murder methods that had been conducted between April 11th and April 26, 2004. This was happening up until a couple of days before Bill was killed. The Easy Pass record was another critical finding. For those of you that don't live in a state with these, an Easy Pass is a transponder to access toll roads, and it tracks where you're driving and when. Melanie's Easy Pass transponder was recorded at a Delaware toll booth on Sunday, May 3rd, with another charge recorded on May 18th. A trip from Woodbridge, New Jersey through Delaware and into Virginia would place a driver on that exact route to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. Melody's explanation for this was that she went furniture shopping in Delaware because the state has no sales tax, but she couldn't provide any receipts or any other evidence about this trip. After the investigation went public, Melanie even contacted EasyPass customer service and attempted to have them remove the 90-cent toll from her account, but the investigators had already looked into her records, so it was too late to hide that evidence. Dr. Miller was concerned after the news broke, and even more concerned when he learned about the prescription. He said that Melanie forged his signature and he cooperated with the police even though he believed she was still innocent. It took some convincing, but he wore a wire during his phone conversations with Melanie, and she consistently denied any involvement in Bill's death. Investigators didn't get a confession like they had hoped, unfortunately, so they went through Melanie's friend named James Finn. He also agreed to record his conversations with her. This is when they found out that Melanie had approached Finn before the murder, asking about how she could get a gun to protect herself. They heard this on the recording, and it once again confirmed her purchasing the gun, and it wasn't because Bill wanted it or owned it, Melanie did. On June 2, 2005, more than 13 months after Bill McGuire's last phone calls, New Jersey State Police finally arrested Melanie McGuire. Officers waited until she dropped her kids off at daycare, and then as she was walking back to get into her car to go to work, they swooped in and arrested her. Melanie McGuire was finally taken into custody. She was transported to the Somerville State Police Station for processing and arraigned later that day before Middlesex County Superior Court. She was charged with the first-degree murder of her husband and booked into the correctional center. Her bail was set at $750,000 and she entered a plea of not guilty. She surprisingly made bail and went home. I was so shocked to find that out, but additional charges came in October 2005 from a grand jury, and then her bail was raised to $2.1 million. She posted it again and was released again. In October 2006, she was charged with 2 counts of hindering the investigation because of anonymous letters that she sent to law enforcement to try to throw them off, and again, she pleaded not guilty and was released. She remained a free woman until the end of the trial. Melanie McGuire's trial began on March 5, 2007 and lasted 7 weeks with over 100 witnesses and tons of media attention. Prosecutors argued that she murdered her husband to start a new life with her affair partner, and the defense focused on challenging the strength of the evidence instead of trying to blame anybody else for what she did. They argued that Melanie lacked the physical ability to commit this crime alone, but didn't say who would have helped her, and emphasized the absence of direct evidence like a murder weapon, blood, or eyewitnesses, so they felt that this case was completely circumstantial. Key testimony came from Dr. Bradley Miller, who confirmed their affair, denied writing a prescription for the chloral hydrate, and cooperated with investigators. The wiretapped conversations were played where Melanie did deny everything, but she did make some statements that suggested insider knowledge. The defense pointed out that she never confessed, though, so those wiretaps basically meant nothing to them. Melanie did not testify, but the jurors still heard her through those recordings and a video diary. On April 23, 2007, after deliberating for several days, the jury returned its verdict. Melanie McGuire was found guilty of first-degree murder for Bill. They also convicted her of desecration of human remains, possession of a weapon for unlawful purposes, and perjury related to the restraining order that she filed against a man that she had murdered. She was acquitted on all other counts, which wasn't ideal, but they were unanimous in the fact that she did in fact murder Bill McGuire in cold blood. When that verdict was read, Melanie was visibly upset, but Bill's family was relieved that she was going to spend the rest of her life behind bars. She's continued to maintain her innocence to this day. On July 19, 2007, Melanie was sentenced to life in prison, plus 5 years with a minimum of 63 3/4 years before she's eligible for parole. She was 34 years old at the time of sentencing, so she's not going to be eligible for parole until she's 101. After she was convicted, Melanie McGuire quickly tried to appeal everything, but that didn't pan out, luckily. And her conviction and sentence were upheld on an appeal in 2011, and the New Jersey Supreme Court declined any further review for this case. She also tried to claim ineffective counsel, and that was also denied. But she remains incarcerated in New Jersey at the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women, while her 2 sons are being raised by their aunt. Bill's sons have no relationship with Melanie. William Bill Thomas McGuire served his country in the Navy. He became a computer programmer and taught college classes. He fulfilled his dream of becoming a father, and now both of his sons are being raised by his sister because both of their parents were taken from them in different ways. His family and children are forever changed by this loss, and it didn't have to be this way. Melanie McGuire is an absolute disgrace to the nursing profession and humanity, and it really makes me angry when we see people take an oath to heal, serve, and advocate for others commit such heinous crimes. If she was unhappy in the marriage, divorce was always an option, not murder. Melanie was the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing in my eyes, and the only sympathy I have in this case is reserved for her children, Bill, and his loved ones. I'm sending them all my love, and I hope that he is resting peacefully. Thank you so much for listening to Bill's story and for spending time with me today. I hope that you had a wonderful week this week, and please don't forget to do something that makes your heart happy. Nurse's orders. Don't forget our butterfly secret handshake in the chat, and I will see you next weekend.